The crash came without warning. One moment, I was in my car, driving home from work. The roads were familiar, the drive routine. It was just another evening, like any other. The next, a deafening crash echoed through the air, and everything around me seemed to slow down, like the world had shifted into a new dimension. I remember the sickening feeling of my body being thrown forward, the seatbelt digging into my chest, the glass shattering around me. And then, nothing. I don't remember the exact moment I left my body, but when I became aware again, I was no longer in my car. I was floating, detached from my physical form. The world below me was distorted, as if I was looking through a veil of water, everything hazy and distant. But even in that strange, liminal space, there was a calmness, a quietness, that was almost foreign to me. And then, I saw him. He stood before me, radiant, a figure that seemed to shine with a light that wasn't from the world. His presence filled the space, and yet, it didn't overwhelm it. He was neither too far away nor too close, but there was a profound sense of intimacy in the way he stood before me. I knew immediately who he was, though I had never seen his face before, Jesus Christ. His eyes, full of compassion, met mine, and in that instant, I felt everything I had ever experienced in life, every joy, every sorrow, every moment of longing and regret, ripple through me. But it wasn't painful. It was like seeing every piece of my story, all at once, and understanding it for the first time. "Do not be afraid," he said softly. His voice was gentle, but it carried an authority that cut through the fear I hadn't even realized I was holding on to. "I have brought you here to show you something. To help you understand what is coming, what is already happening." I tried to speak, but no words came. I was too overwhelmed by his presence, by the peace that radiated from him. He seemed to sense my confusion. "You are not dead, not yet," he explained. "But your life has reached a point where you must understand the importance of what lies ahead. The world is changing, and the choices people make now will determine their future." The words were simple, yet they felt profound. They resonated with something deep inside me, as if I had always known them but had never been able to articulate them. "You will see what is coming," he continued, "and you will be given the choice to prepare, to change the course of your life, and the lives of others." The word "prepare" echoed in my mind. I had always thought of preparing in the context of material things, money, career, future plans. But now, in this moment, I understood that this kind of preparation was not about the physical world, it was about something deeper, something eternal. It was about the soul. I was about to ask him what he meant when suddenly, everything around me shifted. The light that had enveloped me dimmed slightly, and I found myself standing in a different place altogether. I was no longer floating above my body, I was now in a vast, darkened expanse. There was a faint glow in the distance, like a flickering light just beyond my reach. As I moved toward it, I saw that I wasn't alone. There were countless figures, souls, it seemed, each in their own world, yet all heading in the same direction, towards that faint light. I wanted to move towards them, to ask them where they were going, but before I could, the figure of Jesus appeared again. He looked at me with deep love and sadness. "The world you knew," he said, "is fading. People are moving towards the light, but not all of them will reach it. Some will be deceived." I could feel my heart sink as he spoke. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air between us. "You will see the dangers that lie ahead," he said. "But know this, the light is still there, and it is always within reach. No matter how dark the world may become, the way to the light will always remain open." I couldn't understand fully what he meant, but I knew that these words were more than just comforting, they were a warning. A warning about something that was coming, something I couldn't yet see clearly but knew I needed to understand. "You must be ready," he said, his voice full of compassion but firm. "You must prepare your heart, your mind, and your spirit. The changes that are coming will challenge everything you believe, everything you know. You must strengthen your faith, because without it, you will be lost." The vision began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back, gently, as though being drawn into a current I could neither resist nor understand. The warmth of Jesus's presence began to dissipate, and I felt myself being thrust back into the world, into the cold, hard reality of my own body. I gasped for air as I awoke in the wreckage of my car. The pain was immediate and sharp, but it was nothing compared to what I had just experienced. I struggled to move, to breathe, to make sense of what had happened. But as I sat there, disoriented and confused, the words of Jesus echoed in my mind. Prepare your heart, your mind, and your spirit. As I lay there, trying to make sense of the world around me, I realized that the crash, the moment of death I had experienced, was not the end. It was only the beginning. The beginning of a journey I didn't yet fully understand, but one I was now committed to following. The world was changing, and I had seen the warning. It was up to me to prepare, and to help others do the same. The air around me felt heavier as the vision before me began to unfold. It was as though the world itself was shifting, bending in response to the weight of what I was seeing. I was standing in a vast, endless space, and yet, I wasn't alone. The presence of Jesus was still with me, his calm, steady gaze anchoring me in the midst of the overwhelming scene. I didn't understand where I was, but I knew I wasn't in the realm I had just left. This place felt different. It was as though I was watching the future, witnessing something that had not yet fully come to pass but was already set in motion. The world in front of me was full of noise and movement, but it was silent, too. It was as though I was witnessing a silent movie, a sequence of images that spoke louder than words could ever express. There were buildings, structures I didn't recognize, towering over the people below. People, thousands, maybe millions, walked the streets, their faces vacant, focused solely on the devices in their hands. Phones, screens, virtual reality glasses, each person was absorbed, consumed by the technology around them. The world had become a network of artificial connections, each one seemingly linked to a greater whole, but none of it real. As I stood there, the divine figure spoke. His voice was a soft whisper, yet it pierced through the silence of the vision. "This is the future," he said. "This is what awaits those who choose convenience over connection, technology over truth." I watched in awe as the people, disconnected from one another, slowly began to change. It wasn't abrupt. It wasn't sudden. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. But I could see it clearly now. The first change came in the form of a symbol. A mark, small but unmistakable, began to appear on the foreheads and hands of those I was watching. The mark was like a tattoo, glowing faintly, but it wasn't a simple design, it was more than just a symbol. It was a symbol of control, a tool of manipulation, and it spread silently, unchallenged, like a virus. People didn't even seem to notice when it appeared. I felt a pang in my chest, a deep sense of dread. "The mark," I whispered, though the words felt foreign on my tongue. The divine figure nodded solemnly, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Yes," he said, his voice filled with both compassion and sadness. "The mark will not come all at once. It will be introduced slowly, with promises of convenience, security, and connection. People will welcome it, thinking it is a solution, a way to make their lives easier. But they will not understand the cost." I watched as the people who took the mark began to change, not physically, but spiritually. The light in their eyes dimmed, and their expressions became hollow. They no longer interacted with the world around them in meaningful ways. Instead, they were consumed by their devices, their focus solely on the next notification, the next update, the next piece of information that would keep them hooked. They no longer saw one another as they truly were, they saw only what their devices allowed them to see. Their souls, it seemed, were disconnected from reality, tethered only to a network that was not of this world. But why? I asked, unable to hold back my confusion. Why would anyone choose this? Why would they accept something so destructive? Jesus's eyes softened as he looked at me, and he stepped closer, his presence filling the space with a warmth I had not felt before. It will not seem destructive at first. The mark will offer them what they desire most: security, convenience, ease. The world will tell them it is a way to survive, a way to thrive. It will promise them a life without fear, a life where everything is controlled, predictable. But it's a lie, I said, the words coming out before I could fully understand them. It's a trap. Jesus nodded, his expression grave. Yes. A lie wrapped in a promise. But once they take it, they will be bound to it. The mark will take hold of their hearts, their minds, and their spirits. It will separate them from the source of true life, and they will not even realize what they have lost. The vision continued, and I saw the gradual acceptance of the mark by society. At first, it was small, almost unnoticeable. Some people didn't take it, but most did. As more and more individuals accepted it, the pressure to conform grew stronger. People who resisted were ostracized, marginalized, labeled as outcasts. Those who took the mark were given privileges, access to resources, faster services, better healthcare. It seemed like the world was improving for them, but in reality, they were trading their freedom for a counterfeit security. I felt a wave of grief wash over me as I realized the full extent of what was happening. The world had become a place where people no longer knew the value of their own souls. They had traded them for the empty promises of technology, believing that they were advancing, evolving, when in fact, they were stepping further away from the divine. The consequences of the mark are not immediate, Jesus continued, his voice steady but sorrowful. But they will be irreversible. Once the soul is bound, it cannot be freed. There will be no turning back. And those who accept it will lose more than they can understand. But what about those who resist? I asked, my voice trembling. What will happen to them? Jesus' gaze softened, and he took a deep breath, as though the question pained him. Those who resist will face persecution. They will be misunderstood, cast aside, and hunted. But they will be protected by their faith, by their connection to me. They will not be left alone. The vision began to shift again, the world before me blurring into a new scene. I saw people suffering, hungry, afraid, desperate, clinging to the remnants of their humanity. But amidst the darkness, I saw pockets of light. Small communities of believers, united by their faith, their love for one another, and their refusal to be deceived. They were not dependent on the mark. They had built their lives on something stronger, something eternal. And though they faced hardship, they were not alone. They were together, bound by the truth of what they had chosen. You must choose, too, Jesus said, his voice calm but firm. The world will offer you everything, comfort, convenience, safety, but it will come at a cost. The mark is not just a symbol, it is a choice. A choice between the world and the kingdom. Between convenience and truth. Between the temporary and the eternal. I felt a deep stirring in my heart, a knowing that the time was coming, soon, when I, too, would have to make this choice. And though the future was uncertain, I knew now that I wasn't alone. The light was still there, and it would guide me, no matter what happened. As the vision began to fade, Jesus looked at me once more, his eyes filled with love and warning. Prepare, my child. Prepare your heart, your soul, and your spirit. The world is changing, but those who stand firm in their faith will endure. I nodded, though I still didn't fully understand all that I had seen. But one thing was clear, I had been given a glimpse of what was to come. And I could no longer ignore the truth that was now before me. The mark was coming. And it would change everything. The vision before me flickered again, shifting seamlessly from one scene to another. The space around me seemed to grow darker, more foreboding. I wasn't sure how much time had passed since I had first encountered Jesus in this strange realm, but I could feel a weight pressing in, both from the world I had just left behind and from the revelations that were unfolding before me. The divine presence beside me remained steady, comforting yet firm, as though guiding me through the disquieting journey. The air felt charged with a quiet intensity, and I knew that what I was about to witness would change everything. We were now in a bustling city, full of people, all going about their daily lives. The atmosphere seemed familiar, an ordinary scene, almost identical to the world I knew. But there was a subtle difference that I couldn't yet put my finger on. It was as if the world had become too smooth, too perfected, with everything working like clockwork. The people didn't seem unhappy, but their expressions were distant, glazed over. Their eyes were glued to the glowing screens in their hands, their fingers scrolling, swiping, tapping. They moved with a sense of urgency but no real purpose, as though they were racing towards something, yet didn't know what they were seeking. Do you see it? Jesus' voice was quiet, but his words rang clear in my mind. I nodded, but I didn't understand fully what he meant. What am I looking at? He gestured toward the people in the crowd. This is how it begins. At first, they will not even know what is happening. The mark will appear to be nothing more than a convenience. A way to make life easier. To stay connected. To ensure safety. It will seem like the answer to every problem the world faces. The crowd around us shifted and swirled like a living organism. I could see people receiving injections, small chips being implanted in their skin, nothing alarming, nothing overtly sinister. It was so subtle, so quiet, that no one seemed to notice the gradual change that was taking place. At first, it was voluntary. People chose to take the mark, drawn in by the promises that followed, instant access to information, seamless transactions, and protection from the chaos outside. They were told it was necessary to live, to survive in a world that was increasingly unpredictable. They were told it was for their own good. Can you feel it? Jesus asked softly, and this time, I felt it, something in the air, in the atmosphere, that shifted. It wasn't just the physical world that was changing, it was the very essence of what it meant to be human. I watched as people's eyes grew duller, their steps slower. They seemed more at ease with their decision, more complacent. But there was a hollowness in their faces, a lack of depth. They were no longer fully present in their own lives. They think they are gaining freedom, Jesus continued, but in reality, they are surrendering it. The mark promises them everything, the perfect life, the perfect security, the perfect future. But it does so at the expense of their souls. It will not happen all at once, but gradually. People will not see the price they are paying until it is too late. I felt the weight of his words settle into my heart. It made sense, everything seemed so perfect on the surface, so easy. People had grown so used to instant gratification, to answers at their fingertips, that the idea of giving up a small piece of themselves seemed trivial. At first, no one would question it. No one would protest. But the more I watched, the more I understood. The price was not in what they were giving up physically, but what they were losing spiritually. The mark will not seem like a choice at all, Jesus said, his voice filled with both sadness and warning. It will seem like the only choice. It will be the price for living in the world. The world will tell them it is the only way to survive. But those who accept it will no longer be free. They will be bound to it, bound to the system. They will be deceived. I could feel my heart racing, the weight of the vision pressing down on me. But how can anyone know the truth? How can anyone see through the lies? Jesus turned to me, his gaze steady and filled with compassion. The truth will always be there. It will be found in the hearts of those who remain faithful, who do not choose convenience over truth. It will be found in those who resist the pressure, who stand firm in their belief. They will be the ones who see the world for what it truly is. But it will not be easy. It will take courage, discernment, and unwavering faith. The world around me continued to shift, but I felt a sense of peace settling within me. I understood now that the challenge wasn't just about what was happening in the world, it was about the choice I would have to make, the choice all of us would have to make when the time came. Would we choose comfort and security, or would we choose the truth, no matter the cost? As the vision shifted, the world seemed to grow darker still. The once bright streets became filled with artificial light, harsh and unfeeling. People were no longer talking to each other. They were isolated, each person wrapped up in their own digital world, surrounded by a silent, invisible force that controlled them without them even realizing it. The temptation will be so subtle, Jesus explained, his voice like a soft breeze, yet full of authority. The promise of security and peace will be irresistible. People will choose convenience over truth, comfort over faith. They will not question it. They will not see the chains they are binding themselves with. And those who resist will be ostracized. They will be labeled as outcasts, troublemakers, even dangerous. It will be easier to go along with it than to fight. The visions played out like a slow, inevitable descent, showing how the mark would become not just a physical symbol but a tool for spiritual control. As more people took the mark, it spread like wildfire. Those who did not take it were looked upon with increasing disdain. There was no room for those who resisted, no place for those who refused to conform. They were pushed to the margins of society, shunned, and slowly erased from the narrative that the world was crafting. I saw families torn apart by the decision, parents who had accepted the mark, children who had not, and the growing divide between them. The consequences of accepting the mark were not immediately visible to those who had chosen it. At first, life seemed better for them. They had access to everything, everything was faster, more efficient, safer. But as time passed, their souls began to wither. They no longer felt joy, or true love, or connection with one another. They were spiritually numb, disconnected from the divine. As the vision began to fade, I held on to one thing, the reminder that there was still time to prepare, to stay rooted in faith, and to help others do the same. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but the truth would always guide us, no matter how dark the world became. The vision before me shifted once again, this time taking on a gentler, calmer quality. The dark, chaotic images of the world I had just witnessed receded like a passing storm. I found myself standing on a peaceful hill, the light of an early morning sun spilling across the landscape. It was a moment of clarity, a moment of quiet that felt almost too perfect to be real. In this place, the heavy weight of fear and anxiety from earlier visions seemed to lift. There was a sense of stillness in the air, a sense of calm I had not experienced since my journey began. I turned to find Jesus beside me once more, his presence a constant reassurance. His expression was gentle but earnest, his eyes full of love and care. Now that you have seen what is coming, you must understand that it is not enough to simply know what will happen, he said, his voice steady and filled with wisdom. What matters now is how you prepare, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Your faith will be tested, but there is something even more important you must focus on, building the strength of your spirit, strengthening your community, and preparing in practical ways for the days ahead. The words resonated deeply within me, and I felt a renewed sense of urgency. This was no longer about simply knowing what was to come, it was about living with purpose, with intention. It was about embracing the lessons I had learned and using them to guide others. We live in a world that values immediate results and convenience, Jesus continued, but true strength comes from within. Spiritual growth does not happen in an instant, it is built over time, through prayer, reflection, and a constant striving to draw closer to the divine. I closed my eyes for a moment, reflecting on his words. Spiritual growth had often seemed like an abstract concept to me in the past, something I knew I should do, but never fully understood how to nurture. But now, it seemed clearer than ever. The foundation of faith was like the roots of a tree, hidden from view but deeply grounded, supporting everything above. You must cultivate your relationship with God, Jesus added, for when the challenges of the world grow stronger, it will be your faith that sustains you. It will be the knowledge that you are not alone, that you are never abandoned. Strengthen your soul through prayer, through quiet moments of reflection, and through acts of kindness. Seek a deeper understanding of who you are and who God calls you to be. The call to deepen my faith felt both comforting and demanding. I realized now that my spiritual journey had to become the center of everything I did. It wasn't enough to simply go through the motions. I had to intentionally seek God, not just in the calm, but in the chaos. And as I looked out over the peaceful landscape before me, I felt a sense of readiness growing inside me. But spiritual growth is not a solitary journey, Jesus said, as though reading my thoughts. You are called to build communities, places where believers can come together, strengthen one another, and prepare for the days ahead. I looked around the hilltop, noticing the soft whisper of wind that seemed to stir the trees, as if the earth itself was beckoning to the people who would one day gather here. The vision wasn't just about my individual journey, but about the collective journey of all believers, how we would need one another in the coming days. Do not isolate yourselves, he warned. Do not allow the pressure of the world to convince you that you can walk this path alone. Build strong relationships with those who share your faith. Support one another, encourage one another, and prepare together. You will need each other more than ever as the world grows colder and darker. I thought about my own life, about the relationships I had nurtured, or failed to nurture, through the years. I understood now that faith was not just an individual pursuit, it was a communal one. We are called to be a body, each part working together to strengthen the whole. The vision of a divided world in the earlier scenes now made sense. In a world that would increasingly pull people apart, the importance of community would only grow. Start now, Jesus urged. Build those bonds of trust. Reach out to those who are lost and invite them into the fold. For the strength of your community will be the strength of your soul. When you face the trials that will come, it will be your brothers and sisters in faith who will walk beside you. And together, you will endure. The landscape around me shifted again, this time revealing a more practical scene, a community working together, tending to their needs, learning vital skills. People were gathered around, some gardening, others working with tools, and still more sharing food, water, and supplies. There was a sense of unity, not based on convenience or comfort, but on necessity. Spiritual preparedness is the foundation, Jesus said, but you must also be ready to meet the practical demands that will come. The world will grow uncertain, resources will become scarce, and the systems that once held everything together will begin to crumble. I watched as people worked together, sharing knowledge and resources. It was clear that the life they lived was not dependent on technology or convenience, it was rooted in the basics of survival, in caring for one another, and in relying on each other's strength. There were no distractions here, no shiny promises of convenience. There was simply the necessity of survival, the bonds of community, and the strength of faith that kept them moving forward. You must learn to be self-sufficient, Jesus said. Not in a way that isolates you, but in a way that ensures you can contribute to the well-being of your community. Learn the skills you will need, gardening, preserving food, finding clean water, and providing for the physical needs of those around you. You will be tested not only in your faith but in your ability to sustain yourself and others in difficult times. I understood now the gravity of the preparations ahead. The days of relying on others, on systems that were beyond our control, were numbered. In their place would be a world where the strength of faith and the practicality of survival would determine who could endure. As the vision began to fade, I felt a deep sense of responsibility settle upon me. The divine presence stood by my side, his eyes full of understanding and compassion. You must share these lessons, he said softly. Do not keep them to yourself. There are many who are blind to what is coming, who do not understand the urgency of preparing. It is not enough to simply live well for yourself. You must teach others to grow spiritually, to build strong communities, and to prepare practically. Each person you teach will be a part of the greater body, and together, you will help one another stand strong. I felt the weight of those words, the responsibility to act on the revelations I had been given. The path was clear now. Spiritual strength, community bonds, and practical preparation would form the foundation of what was to come. It was not a question of if, but when. And when that time came, I knew I would be ready. I would not face it alone. And neither would anyone else who was willing to stand firm in faith. The world around me darkened once more, though not in the same way as before. The ominous visions had subsided, but a deeper stillness had settled in. I found myself standing in the presence of Jesus once again. His expression, while filled with compassion, carried a profound weight. This was the final moment, the culmination of all that I had learned. He spoke softly, yet his words rang with authority. You have seen much, child, but the journey does not end here. The darkness of the world will grow in intensity. People will be lost, and fear will consume many. The mark of the beast will deceive, and many will be led astray by false promises. But remember, while the darkness may deepen, there is always the possibility of revival, of salvation. I listened intently, my heart both heavy and hopeful. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. The challenges that lay ahead were real and undeniable, but there was something profound in his voice, something that spoke of an unwavering hope, even in the midst of the most trying times. There is always hope, Jesus continued. While the world may become more fragmented, there will always be those who stand firm in their faith. Those who hold fast to my love and my teachings will never be abandoned. They will endure through the darkest moments, and their light will shine brighter for it. I stood silently, allowing the depth of his message to settle within me. It was hard to imagine the world becoming darker than the visions I had already witnessed, but his words were clear. Despite the trials, despite the deception and the suffering, there was a path that led to salvation. It was a path of faith, of perseverance, and of unwavering hope. Jesus continued, his voice gentle but filled with divine strength. You must always remember that no matter how dire the circumstances, I am with you. I am with all who call upon my name, who seek the truth, and who strive to live according to the love that I have shown. There will be times when you feel alone, when the weight of the world's suffering bears down on you, but you must never forget that my love is greater. I will never leave you. His words wrapped around my soul like a warm embrace. The fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, all of it began to fade. It wasn't that the challenges ahead were no longer real. It wasn't that the darkness would disappear. But I understood now that the true power was not in fighting the darkness alone, but in standing firm in faith and in the assurance of God's love. The world may change, Jesus said, his eyes filled with compassion, but my love for you will never change. You are always welcome in my embrace, and I will guide you through even the darkest valley. As you walk through life, share this message with others. Let them know that there is always hope. There is always a chance for revival. Even in the most difficult of times, the possibility of salvation is never lost. The warmth of his words filled me with a sense of purpose. I understood now that the message was not just for me, it was for the world. There were so many who would be lost, who would be swept away by the false promises of security, comfort, and convenience. But there were also many who, with the right guidance, could find the path of faith, hope, and salvation. The moment began to feel like a culmination, a closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The vision of the world, the warnings of the coming trials, the need for spiritual growth and community building, they were all parts of a larger picture. But now, as I stood in the presence of Jesus, I understood my true purpose. You must return now, Jesus said softly, his voice carrying both sadness and hope. But when you return, you will not return empty-handed. You will return with a mission. A mission to spread the message of hope, to build up my people, and to prepare them for the days ahead. I felt the weight of those words settle deeply within me. This was no longer just about personal survival, it was about leading others, about sharing the message of faith, hope, and love that I had received. I would need to share everything I had learned, everything I had seen, to help those who were lost or unsure find their way. As the world grows darker, Jesus continued, there will be many who will turn away from the light, thinking it is lost. But you must be the light that guides them back. You must show them that, no matter how bleak it may seem, there is always the possibility of revival. There is always the chance for salvation, for healing, for redemption. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing his words. I knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, struggles, and moments of doubt. But I also knew now that the mission was clear. It was not just about surviving the coming trials, it was about helping others find their way through them. It was about being a beacon of light, no matter how dark the world became. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder, his touch full of comfort and strength. Go with peace, knowing that I am always with you. Share the message of love and hope. Do not be afraid, for I have overcome the world. And with that, the vision began to fade. I felt a gentle pull, a return to my own body, to the world I had left behind. As I opened my eyes, I was back in the hospital room, the familiar sounds of the machines around me a stark contrast to the profound stillness I had just experienced. But even as I lay there, still recovering from the accident, I felt a new sense of purpose fill me. The world outside might be full of uncertainty, but I knew one thing for certain: there was always hope. There was always a way forward for those who believed, who held firm to faith, and who were willing to walk the difficult path of love and truth. I closed my eyes again, not in fear, but with peace. The world would grow darker, but the light would never fade, as long as I carried it within me. I had been given a mission, and I would carry it out with love, with courage, and with the knowledge that no matter what came, I would never be alone. And so, with a heart full of hope and a renewed sense of purpose, I stepped forward into the world once more, ready to share the light of salvation with all who would listen.